Well said. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said at the outset of this hearing, I am deeply troubled regarding IRS employees' improper handling of applications for tax-exempt status. However, I am encouraged that senior leadership of the agency during this period has been removed. In December, the Senate confirmed a new commissioner of the IRS, and he has pledged his commitment to cooperating with Congress and reforming the agency. I do look forward to working with him. While I welcome the opportunity to hear the concerns of these witnesses to participate in this hearing, I do fear that the committee is once again presenting only one side of the story. The committee's 10-month-long investigation has uncovered no evidence to support claims that the IRS was targeting any groups for political reasons. Not one single witness has appeared before this committee and told us that the White House was involved in directing the conduct of the IRS employees. The Deputy Inspector General for Investigations identified absolutely no evidence of political motivation after a review of more than 5,000 emails of IRS employees, and that was Russell George, and he was the one whose report really sparked this committee's hearings. And I personally asked him that question, did you find evidence of political motivation for what was going on? And he said no. Instead, as we've learned in a transcribed interview last year, it was a self-described conservative Republican manager in Cincinnati who oversaw IRS employees who developed the inappropriate criteria for examination. And Mr. Sekulow, you were helpful with some statistics this morning, and I wanted to ask you about that. You mentioned 104 conservative groups targeted. Was that the number?
This is from the report of the IRS dated through July 29th of 2013. 104 conservative organizations on that report were targeted.
Thank you. And then 7 progressive targeted groups?
7 progressive target groups, all of which received their tax exemption.
Does it give the total number of applications? In other words, 104 conservative groups targeted. How many applied? How many conservative groups applied?
In the TIGTA report, there was, I think the number was 283, that they had become part of the target. But actually, applications, a lot of the IRS justification for this, at least purportedly, was an increase in applications, and there was actually a decrease in the number.
And does it give the number of progressive groups that applied for tax-exempt status?
No, the only report that has the progressive...
No?
The one that I have just is the report I have in front of me is the one through which just has the 7.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
None of those have been
now,
denied.
In addition, the committee's investigation in this matter revealed that the IRS also sought out liberal groups with these words, progressive or occupy, in the names. At an Oversight Committee hearing last year, Russell George admitted he actually failed to inform our committee that he was aware of progressive groups receiving similar treatment as conservative groups. And now, Ms. Mitchell, you've favored us with your testimony this morning, and thanks again for coming. You are, we just found out about you Monday afternoon, so we didn't have too much time to read about you. But I saw your extensive CV, which is online, and it has you as a partner at the Foley Lardner law firm here in Washington. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And it says that you are a member of the firm's political law practice. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The firm has a taxation practice that's different from the political law
Correct.
practice. Okay. But you're in the political law practice. If I'm not mistaken, you have personally served as legal counsel to the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Am I correct in that?
Among others, yes.
You have personally served as legal counsel to the National Republican Congressional Committee as well. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
You served as a legislator in Oklahoma. Am I correct? Would that be as a Republican legislator?
No, actually, I was a Democrat then.
Were you? Okay.
Until I realized that that had become the party of the government, not the people.
Okay.
Mr. Cartwright, just for the record, not all of us would agree with that, Ms. Mitchell. We're entitled to our political views, too.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. I guess the question I have for you is, in your law practice, your political law practice, how many progressive groups do you represent right now?
None, because it doesn't work that way.
How many liberal groups do you represent right now?
It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way, Congressman.
Well, you testified that you represent Tea Party groups.
I do.
All right. So it works that way.
Yeah, that's right. And as I say to people, in this law practice, you can't play for USC and Notre Dame.
How many
You have to pick
Occupy
a
groups
team.
do you represent?
Lord, I wouldn't represent one of them on a bet.
All right. I think you've answered my question.
I've represented the ACLU, however, Mr. Cartwright.
Now, in light of continuing revelations that the majority on this committee has excluded Democratic members and staff from in-person meetings with the Inspector General's staff, serious concerns persist about the impartiality of the work of the majority on this committee. Sadly, only Tea Party groups are represented before this panel today, and one of them has already testified before Congress. Since the identities witnesses has only been revealed on Monday afternoon, our staff was unable to identify a minority witness on such short notice, and as a result, this is not a balanced hearing. Now, this committee is charged with conducting oversight of the Federal Government, and as members of Congress, we must exercise that authority in a responsible manner. Calling this kind of one-sided hearing and making false legal allegations attacking the credibility of career Federal employees falls well short of that standard. Going forward, I want to see us working together to conduct responsible oversight of the Internal Revenue Service. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I would just point out that, well, first of all, Ms. Mitchell doesn't represent progressive groups because it sounds like, according to Mr. Sekulow, they don't need it. They were 7 for 7.
Yeah, I'd urge you to have some come over here and testify and find out what they were asked.
The minority had 9 days' notice of this hearing. They could have got a witness here. Maybe you want to go get one of those 7 who got approved out of the 7 who were put on some notice. But what the committee did, what the minority did have time to do was to write me a letter urging me not to pursue having Barbara Bosserman come here and answer our questions. You had time for that, but you didn't have time to find someone to come testify? Recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a lot more interested in having a balanced investigation than I am a balanced hearing. And in that light, Ms. Eckelbrett, did you hear the President say there was not a smidgen of corruption?
I've heard that he said that, yes, sir.
Ms. Garrison, did you hear the President say there was not a smidgen of corruption? And let me just translate that, because smidgen's not a legal term. I assume he meant scintilla, and I assume he meant criminality instead of corruption. How was he able to make that conclusion? Neither of you have been interviewed by the Bureau, have you?
No, sir.
And according to Mr. Sekulow, of his 41 clients, 3 have been interviewed, or 3 were asked to be interviewed.
Right, not interviewed yet.
Okay. 0 of 41 have actually been interviewed.
Correct.
All right. So the President says there's not a smidgen of criminality or corruption. Do either of you remember seeing a witness named Lois Lerner sitting at the very table y'all are sitting at? Do you remember her invoking her Fifth Amendment privilege, the same privilege that she targeted some of your groups for trying to educate people about? Some of your groups just want to simply educate people about the Constitution, the one that she availed herself of the very second she was exposed to criminal investigation. So how can the President say there's not a smidgen of criminality when Lois Lerner invoked the Fifth Amendment? 41 witnesses haven't been interviewed, including the 2 that are here right now. How can he possibly draw that conclusion?
Good question.
I wish one of the colleagues on the other side of the aisle would ask the President how in the world he concluded no criminality when Lois Lerner sat in front of them and invoked her privilege against criminality. How do you square that?
Mr. Gowdy, if I may, she invoked her Fifth Amendment privilege, which she has the right to do, of course, and you and I both respect that, because we now know the reason why. It wasn't perhaps as clear as it was made yesterday. She invoked her Fifth Amendment privilege because she knew, after she made a false statement and a planted question at an ABA meeting, she knew that, in fact, there was her words and her emails, off-plan drafting of rules targeting conservative groups. She also said at a Duke Law Forum that people are asking us what we can do, and she said, I can't do anything until I see the 990s, the tax returns that are filed. That was all going on while she was redrafting the rules with the highest level of the Chief Counsel's office. Mr. Cartwright.
Mr. Sekulow,
Yes, sir.
I want to say this. I understand why she invoked her Fifth Amendment privilege. I don't understand why in the hell the President of the United States would prejudge an investigation
I don't either.
before any of your clients were interviewed, before either of these two victims, and I know you don't like that word, but I'm using it in the criminal sense of the word, before either of these two victims were interviewed. He has gone on national television, he has prejudged the investigation, and in my judgment has compromised the Department of Justice, which leads me to this question, Mr. Sekulow.
Yes, sir.
There is the option when you have a compromised investigation and a chief executive who has prejudged the outcome before the jury's even gotten all the evidence, he's got an option of appointing a special counsel, right?
Yes, he does.
And the special counsel regulation says if it's extraordinary circumstances that furthers the public interest. Can you think of anything more extraordinary than government targeting people based on their political beliefs?
No, I agree with you 100%. And I also would point to the email of June 14, 2012, which was just released, because this shows the need for a special prosecutor at this point on the criminal aspect of this. And again, Mr. Cartwright, when you asked about the no evidence of politics, let me quote from the email. Don't know who in your organization is keeping tabs on C4s, but since we mentioned potentially addressing them off-plan in 2013, I've got my radar up, and this seemed interesting. These are coming from the most senior people within the Chief Counsel's Office of the IRS, which is a presidential appointee. Again, it's an office I came out of, so I have due respect for the office. But at this point, a special prosecutor to evaluate the criminal sanctions or criminal laws applicable would probably be the best, I believe would be the best way to go, because I don't think the Justice Department right now, again, with due respect to the Justice Department, is institutionally capable of doing this. And I need to say this also, because I thought that the question, Mr. Cartwright, on Ms. Mitchell's legal representation, she has an exceptionally excellent reputation in this town as a lawyer. And her clients tend to be conservative because that's who her clients tend to be. But, you know, I'm a conservative also, but like I said, I've represented the American Civil Liberties Union in cases at the Supreme Court of the United States. I've represented the National Democratic Policy Committee as well. So I don't think it's fair to go after the lawyers in a situation where it is the IRS that is trying to use their procedures to justify their illegal conduct. Remember the apology? They offered the apology. You know what? The apology is not accepted.
Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, I believe the ranking subcommittee member said that there are 13 people assigned to this investigation, if I heard correctly. 13 people in 6 months have not had time to interview a single solitary one of Mr. Sekulow's clients. 13 people in 6 months have not had time to interview either of these two witnesses, and yet the chief executive, the President of the United States, has already prejudged the outcome of this investigation. So either it's ongoing or it's not. Either he's wrong or Eric Holder is wrong. In either case, it is time for special counsel, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Recognize the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this intriguing hearing. I will say at the outset, my friend from South Carolina, for whom I have great regard, we don't agree on much, but we have mutual respect. But I will say, it ought to trouble a Tea Party panel and a lawyer who represented the ACLU that this committee took upon itself a unique task in voting that a U.S. citizen, irrespective of her views or what you think she did or did not say, to protect herself against self-incrimination, a very sacred principle enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. And it was enshrined in there because of the experience of our founders with the British. It's a very real right. This committee took upon itself, every member on that side, including my friend from South Carolina, voted unilaterally to decide she dispensed with, waived her Fifth Amendment right. And if we can do that to her, we can do it to you. Every one of us on this side of the aisle voted not to do that because, irrespective of what one may decide on the substance of Ms. Lois learners' behavior, testimony, whatever, we think American citizens are entitled to constitutional protections, and that the Congress, a committee of Congress, does not have the unilateral ability to decide on its own that you waive that right. And listening to the testimony and the concerns here about a government that's overreaching, I would think you might be concerned about this committee overreaching. But it wasn't this side, Ms. Mitchell, that did it. It wasn't this. No, I'm not asking you a question. You made a statement. I'm making a statement. Ms. Engelbrecht, your written testimony states you believe various run-ins with the government were prompted by your applications for a tax-exempt status with the IRS. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
One of the federal agents you mentioned is OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. You complained specifically that in 2012, OSHA inspected your company, Engelbrecht Manufacturing, and which manufactures fabricated metal products, and you state that OSHA found, and I quote, nothing serious or significant, and nonetheless, OSHA issued fines in excess of $20,000. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
OSHA's inspection report shows that it identified 10 violations at your manufacturing company, all of which it classified as serious. These violations included the failure to provide employees with appropriate eye or face protection when exposed to eye or face hazards from flying particles, molten metal, liquid chemicals, acids, caustic liquids, chemical gases or vapors, or potentially injurious light radiation. And, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that the inspection report go into the record at this point.
Without objection.
Now, is it your contention that those findings were politically motivated because of your seeking a tax-exempt status for another entity? That those violations, in fact, were trivial or non-serious, in your view?
When OSHA came to our shop, they came under a false SIC classification. They came when neither my husband nor I were there, and proceeded to interview employees. And I would very much welcome everything that that OSHA
But my question,
gave to us be
Ms. Engelbrecht,
included,
my
because the
question was-
cover letter of OSHA clearly states
Ms.
that they
Engelbrecht.
found nothing. No, sir, let me please answer
No,
the
ma'am,
question.
I am going to control this questioning, and I'm asking you a simple question. You're going to have a press conference later. You can speak to your heart's content there. I only have 5 minutes. Were these or were these not, in your view, a serious matter? I thought your testimony said they were not serious.
In my opinion, and in the cover letter stated opinion of OSHA, they were not serious.
You complained that neither you nor your husband were there. Is it not the case that it's OSHA's practice not to give advance warning? That's the whole point of an inspection, to determine whether a facility, in fact, is safe, whether there are violations or not. To tell you we're coming next Thursday is obviously to give you a heads up to clean up whatever you might think is, a violation. Isn't that their normal practice?
Sir, I don't know what the normal practice is. We complied, as we did with every agency that came over these last 3 years.
Well, if it's your testimony now under oath that you don't know their normal practice, how are you able, nonetheless, to conclude that it's politically motivated and has something to do with your seeking a tax-exempt status to punish you for that, as opposed to their normal practice looking at a manufacturing facility to make sure it's safe for the workers?
Because in the past 3 years, after nearly 20 years of being in business and no agency coming to visit with us, the succession of agencies that have now come to us for all manner of things begs the question, the statistical probabilities of what happened to me happening without political motivation is staggering.
Well, I would just note for the record, Ms. Engelbrecht and Mr. Cicolo, because we're so concerned about the law here and making sure there are no violations of the law. Are you aware of the fact that it's actually illegal for the Department of Labor's OSHA to give advance notice when it does inspections? That's actually a matter of law.
I was not aware of that, but I'm not contending that they should have given us notice. I'm only observing.
But you complained about it. You complained that you didn't get advance notice, and you just said you were concerned that neither your husband, I understand the concern, but you understand that they can't check in advance to see, will you be there?
Nor did we try to do anything to discourage that process, even though we weren't on premise.
And I absolutely take that at face value. But it's a huge leap then, given that, to conclude that someone's out to get you, Ms. Engelbrecht. that there's any political motivation whatsoever with OSHA following its standard operating procedures.
But Mr. Connolly, you're aware that the information from the
Gentleman's-
IRS is
Mr.
shared with other agencies. I'm sorry.
Mr. Sekulow,
Sorry,
I have not asked you a question.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Ms. Engelbrecht, in the first 20 years of business, did OSHA ever visit your place of business?
No, sir.
Never once?
No, sir.
After you filed the application, OSHA visited then, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in the first 20 years of business, did the ATF ever come to your business?
No, sir.
Okay. And they came a couple times once you filed your application?
Yes, sir.
Right. And in your first 20 years of business, did the IRS ever audit you?
No, sir.
But once you filed your application, did they audit you?
Many times.
Okay. And in your first 20 years of business, did the FBI ever visit you?
No, sir.
But once you filed your application, did they visit you?
6 times.
But Mr. Connolly wants us all to believe that's a coincidence. I would recognize the... Go ahead. I was just pointing out that in 20 years of business, OSHA never came to Mr. Engelbrecht's place of business. Yes, I was. And in 20 years of business, OSHA never visited, FBI never visited,
Invoking my name,
IRS
Mr.
never
Chairman.
audited. Okay, well, you can respond. Even though I
Thank you.
gave you plenty of extra time, I'll give you some more.
Thank
you got, the gentleman's recognized for a minute.
So where is the proof, though, other than you're connecting dots that may or may not be connected, that OSHA was politically motivated?
I didn't say proof. I'm just saying you would want us all to believe it's a coincidence.
Oh, well, and you want us all to believe that by innuendo there must be something
15 times in a 2-year time frame, 4 different federal agencies visit this lady's place of business, audit her personal and business records, and you expect us to believe that just...
I don't expect you to believe.
Shazam, it
I don't
just
expect you.
happened?
I don't expect you to believe anything. You can believe whatever you choose
Well,
to
you can believe. You can believe it's all a coincidence. I refuse to do that.
No, I didn't say that either. I believe in fact-based, empirical oversight, and innuendo, and drawing conclusions, and paranoia
gentleman
do not substitute for fact-based, empirical oversight, Mr. Chairman.
Well, here are the facts.
And McCarthyism.
She filed an application for C4 status and subsequently was visited by OSHA, FBI, ATF, and was audited by the IRS. That happened.
Mr. Chairman?
I would just say, Mr. Chairman, you should be on the panel, given your views.
Mr. Chairman, will you yield your time for a parliamentary question?
Yield to the gentleman. Yes.
Thank you.
Gentleman's recognized. Excuse me.
Can someone answer for me, in the report that was referred to by Mr. Connolly and the OSHA report, the witness reached a negotiated agreement with OSHA and paid fines.
I'm not sure this is a parliamentary inquiry.
It is, because it
You
deals
want to enter something
with...
in the record? We'll put it in the record.
It's already in the record. My question is it true that the witness paid fines substantiating the serious violations that were found out of the OSHA report?
I think that question's been asked.
No, I did not hear. That's my parliamentary question.
Well,
Will the witness answer the question?
Mr. Chairman, that's not
when
a
you get
parliamentary
recognized, which will be shortly, we'll let you ask that question. And I think the witness has answered, but if she wants to answer it again and you ask it, I'm sure she'll do that. I want to recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Engelbrecht, you started to respond to the gentleman from Virginia by saying the cover letter, and he cut you off. Go ahead. You can finish what you wanted to say in that cover letter.
Thank you. Just that the cover letter from OSHA made very clear that they found no serious or concerning findings.
Okay. Well, I want to apologize because what happens in these hearings, quite frankly, is that you come to tell the story of a true American patriot. And then politics can be played. And I'm not making any assertions towards my colleagues opposite. I'm just saying that it becomes very clear that it was extremely coincidental that all these federal agencies decided to visit your place of business after you took one particular action. And so I find it, the probability of that happening extremely low. I do want to follow up. In your opening testimony, though, you made some assertions, and you mentioned the gentleman from Maryland who is here, and I want to make sure that in that that we don't do anything indirectly that would disparage a member of this House. You were saying that he targeted you. Is that correct?
Congressman Cummings on 3 separate occasions sent letters on letterhead from this committee stating that he had concerns and felt it necessary to open an investigation on True the Vote. Yes.
All right. So it was correspondence as it relates to this committee finding more facts as it relates to getting to the truth.
Yes, he according to the letters, indicated that it was the consensus of this committee that we needed to be investigated.
Oh, he said you needed to be investigated.
And that he was going to be the self-appointed person to do that investigation of us. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so as we look at it, Ms. Mitchell, so the point of that is as they were going in, saying that she should be investigated in what terms? I mean, what's the scope of that investigation?
True the Vote is a 501c3 now, but its application was still pending at the time. And True the Vote became very involved and is the nation's leading organization which tries to enforce election laws and ensure the integrity of elections. True the Vote has recruited hundreds and hundreds of volunteers across the country who volunteer to help preserve the integrity of the elections in their communities and in their states. They challenge, True the Vote has filed lawsuits to encourage to force localities to comply with federal law and cleaning up voter rolls, among other things. Congressman Cummings took it upon himself, and I think that I was not representing True the Vote in that particular proceeding, but there were a series of letters sent to True the Vote from Congressman Cummings, which purported to be on behalf of the committee, using the franking privilege, and which sought to delve into the inner workings of True the Vote and to make allegations about True the Vote that were not true, demanding materials, demanding information, demanding that Catherine Engelbrecht and representatives of True the Vote make themselves available in Washington. And frankly, we think that is improper, and we will deal with that in a different proceeding. But we also, we also want to know whether there was any effort. We want to get to the bottom of how these coincidences happened. And we're going to try to figure out whether there was any staff of this committee that might have been involved in putting True the Vote on the radar screen of some of these federal agencies. We don't know that, but we're going to do everything we can do to try to get to the bottom of how did this all happen.
The gentleman yield.
Yes.
I want to thank the gentleman for his courtesy. What she just said is absolutely incorrect and not true. Letters were sent out as the ranking member. I am the ranking member of this committee. I did nothing different than what Mr. Issa has done when looking into situations. And I don't want to put out there that I was trying to act on behalf of the committee or anything unusual. We were basically looking into voting situations and whether voters were in any way being impeded from voting. I want to thank the gentleman for, and we have the letters, by the way, and they're all and Chairman Issa was sent copies of all the letters. So it wasn't like we weren't hiding anything. Thank you very much.
Well, and I thank the gentleman and certainly wanting to make sure that you have the opportunity. And so, Ms. Engelbrecht, the gentleman from Maryland obviously is one that, from a targeting standpoint, so I would just let him follow up on that and make sure and give him the yield to him in terms of following up to assure you that neither he nor his staff or anyone would have contacted the IRS to investigate you and to do that. And so I'd yield to the gentleman and let him give you those personal assurances.
I can assure you. Let me just be very, and I want to thank the gentleman for that. There is no one that I know of that care more about the rights of our citizens than I do, and I'm sure all of us do. But just as you all have the passion that you have, and I respect that, I too have the passion to make sure that no one, I don't give a, whether it's Tea Party, Republican, or Democrat, nobody is blocked from voting. There's no way that I would be sitting here today, no way, unless it was for unless we had fair and voting in this nation. My 88-year-old mother, who's probably watching us right now, could not vote. And the last thing I said, Ma, one of the things she said to me, I do not want to die with the thought that my people are losing their right to vote. And so I got to tell you, I want to thank the gentleman because I wanted that to be clear. And I will fight until I die for the right to vote. Because it's not about me. It's about generations yet unborn and their rights. And just like you all care about IRS not doing the things that you feel that they've done, I feel the same way. I don't want the IRS targeting anybody. But at the same time, I have the same passion about their right to vote. And again, I want to thank the gentleman for your.
Well, I want the gentleman to be able to assure Ms. Engelbrecht that he, and I'll let him speak to this, but that he did not direct, nor his staff direct anybody at the IRS to investigate you and look into this particular matter.
I can assure you of that, but what he just said. I
thank the gentleman. I thank the chairman for his patience.
And I want to thank, I really do thank the gentleman for that opportunity.
Gentlelady from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I am looking at a letter from the U.S. Department of Justice in response to your letter and Chairman Issa's letter requesting information pertaining to an ongoing investigation. And I don't know if this is in the record or not, but at last, for it to be entered into the record, is there a response to your request? And
This is a response from Mr. Cole,
this is the response
Deputy Assistant Attorney General.
No, from Assistant Director Stephen Kelly to your letter and Mr. Issa's letter.
Oh, this is before the first year. Okay. Yeah, without objection.
Thank you. Like all Americans, I was outraged to learn of the targeting by the IRS of both conservative and progressive groups. This type of political targeting by a government agency that is supposed to have the public's trust is completely unacceptable. So I certainly understand the emotion and passion of the witnesses. As members of Congress, particularly members of this committee, we have a duty to look into this type of wrongdoing and mismanagement that occurred at the IRS. We also have to learn from the mistakes and put processes in place to make sure that they never happen again. And I think this is something that all of my colleagues on this panel are committed to doing. The Department of Justice is also rightfully investigating the incident to determine if any laws were broken. But, you know, Mr. Chairman, I think it's completely inappropriate to provide these witnesses with a platform today to unfairly attack ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Cummings. Like any member of this committee, he has the authority, and one might even say the moral obligation, to conduct investigations into serious concerns that are raised to his attention. In this case, the ranking member requested documents to investigate serious public allegations of voter disenfranchisement regarding True the Vote. He wrote letters laying out these allegations, he cited the sources for his information, and he asked True the Vote to provide documents to either prove or disprove these allegations. Mr. Cummings' actions were no different than those of Congressman Issa when he served as this committee's ranking member, and Representative Issa sent letters after letter in his making similar documents requests from all kinds of government and private entities. I would expect that you and every other member of this committee would defend the right of all members to seek information and documents regardless of party affiliation. It's no surprise that the group the ranking member has been investigating should lash out against him. What is surprising is that they would suggest that the FBI investigate his actions as potential illegal activity. And what is so astonishing to me is that you would give them a public forum to do so. The false and outrageous allegations against Mr. Cummings were included in written testimony distributed by this committee in advance of today's hearing and posted on the committee's public website. You knew this was coming and you allowed it to happen. And earlier today, Mr. Cummings wrote a letter to the Board of the Office of Congressional Ethics, easily debunking these claims and providing full copies of all of his correspondence with True the Vote. He also made all of those letters available to the public on the Democratic Committee website. I ask that his letter be made part of the hearing record today, and I regret that our committee would allow itself to be used for such a blatant political stunt.
Without objection.
Thank you. I want to sort of touch back, as someone who has a large number of manufacturers in my district. I am very, very concerned for our small business owners. Ms. Engelbrecht, you are a small business owner. I congratulate you on that. They're the engine of our economy, even during the recession. It's the only part of our economy that continued to grow, and you certainly provided 30-plus employees with a good living so that they could take care of their families. Just answer yes or no. Am I correct in saying that you are in the business of manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, parts for oil drilling and the like? Is that correct?
We're a high-precision machine shop, so we make small component parts.
You make small component parts, but you use things like milling machinery and that type of thing?
Computerized machinery, yes, ma'am.
Okay. I have quite a few of those in my district, and I am actually somewhat worried that OSHA had not inspected you in 20 years. I would think that OSHA should be inspecting any manufacturing business on a regular basis, and that we would not go a whole 20 years without ever inspecting the health and safety environment for employees. And I personally, I know that you don't think that the allegations of not providing eye protection and the like is not a serious concern, but as someone who's been around a lot of heavy manufacturing, let me just say that it is a concern. And I'm out of time. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Engelbrecht, in the 20 years prior to OSHA coming there, did you ever have any serious injury at your place of business?
No, sir. And to be clear on the eyewear point, we do absolutely require eyewear to be worn. They just weren't happy with the kind
We can probably
we provided.
Someone probably forgot to put their goggles on one day, right?
Well, forgot to put the goggles on. They identified an entry point that they thought was an exit, which cost, I don't know, $4,300 if memory serves, something like that.
Thank you. We've all had businesses in our district have OSHA show up and find that they put a box in the aisleway that they forgot to move, and they get hit with a fine.
Exactly what happened.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly appreciate you all being here today and just reflecting on the past 3 years in this committee here. And I know a lot of politically charged issues get brought forth, but listening to the testimony today really makes you think about what being an American means, what it should mean. And we can try to divert into questions about OSHA and other violations, but what I heard was two very impassionate testimonies from two Americans that wanted to exercise their freedom to publicly speak about their preferences in an election. We can sit and try to pretend that this didn't happen. We can go back and look at the statements. We can go back to May of 2012 when the IRS internal investigator said that there was substantial inappropriate bias going on. We can go to when Mr. Miller had his epiphany that this was going on. We can go to when the President said that this is inexcusable and intolerable. And Eric Holder, the same thing. This is unacceptable. And so there's no question that this happened. We can't sit up here as Democrats and Republicans and deny that the IRS did not target people. They did. They apologized. There's been hearings. Ms. Lerner came in here, took the fifth, and Mr. Sekulow talked about that earlier, and maybe we can talk about it again. But this is about our rights as Americans. That's why we're here today. I'd like to think that the people on the other side of the aisle, as well as the people on this side, would equally listen to Occupy Wall Street or liberal groups that were targeted by a Republican president. It's about the federal government using their power to suppress our rights as Americans, and that's wrong in any party, in any language. We're not a third world country. I hope we're not a country that's run by a dictator that fixes elections. Sadly, we won't know what the outcome of the last election would have been had this targeting not taken place. We'll never know that. We won't know if the election would have been altered if we weren't misled by the YouTube video story about Benghazi. We won't know that. There's a lot of things that were done before the election that now that it's over, people are saying, okay, well, now we got to clean up this mess, so let's pay attention to this IRS scandal, this targeting. And that happened. Well, it didn't happen for very long because it was in July during an economic address at Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, that President Obama charged the Republicans turning the IRS matter into part of an endless parade of distractions, political posturing, and phony scandals. I mean, I thought we were past that. What we're here today is to make sure you all get a fair chance and a fair response to your questions. So we have attorneys here today representing these clients. Have they gotten that chance yet?
No, they have not. I mean, I represent many groups, and I talk to many groups. There's a particular group, Tea Party Patriots. They host a Sunday night conference call every Sunday night with grassroots groups from across the country, literally hundreds of people, who talk about things like what are some positive alternatives to the Affordable Care Act, and they hear speakers, and they are trying to educate themselves about issues so that in turn people in their communities who are part of their groups can learn about what Congress is doing, can have an impact on public policy. But many of those groups are the very same groups that were targeted, that were besmirched, that were treated and continue to be treated in a terrible manner, and now who the IRS is proposing to essentially silence permanently. Right. And none of them have been interviewed by the FBI to hear the stories of what they went through. In Catherine Engelbrecht's case, in True the Vote's case, when it got its, I want to say, third round of questions from the IRS, about 2 years ago this month, there were 102 questions when you take into consideration the subparts and the subparts. 102 questions, and that was almost 2 years after the application had been filed. And I have been doing this a long time, and I have never seen anything like it. I knew something was going on. And to say that it was boneheaded mistakes is to treat all of these people with utter contempt and disrespect, and to deny what they've been through and what they are still going through. And I would implore the Democratic members of the committee and of the Congress to not fall in line and try to defend something that is indefensible, and to treat this as some kind of partisan ball game. We had this one brief shining moment last summer where both Democrats and Republicans came together, and Congress was intent upon doing its oversight duty, and the media was intent upon actually exposing wrongdoing, even in this administration, and somehow that dissipated with that speech that you just referred to, and I find it very distressing.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. The ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from Maryland, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Mitchell, I just, we have interviewed a whole lot of people in IRS, and perhaps there's still more to be done. And I want to emphasize that the members on this side of the aisle are just as concerned about every single taxpayer being treated fairly. And so we've listened, and we've seen the testimony. And so it's not, and I'm sure we will, if there are things to be corrected, I know that there are a lot of things that have already been corrected based on the IG's report. And so, I just want you to be assured that we care about these issues too. We have constituents who we want to make sure are treated fairly too, no matter who they are, And so I want to make that clear. I also want to go back to Mr. Meadows. I want to thank you for, again, yielding. And Ms. Engelbrecht, Mr. Meadows is right. There's no targeting over here. We were just trying to figure out, make sure that no one was unfairly being impeded from voting. And it's a very serious matter for me. But the letters that I sent you, some of them concern a report. And the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights issued that report in 2012. And their report examined your organization's activities in North Carolina, particularly with respect to where your poll watchers were placed. The report said that your poll watchers, and I quote, and this is a report, and this is what we were trying to figure out whether it was true or not, Mr. Meadows. And it said, go to the polls on Election Day and aggressively challenge the registration, the identity, or eligibility of prospective voters, end of quote. According to this report, your volunteers were concentrated in counties in North Carolina that have high percentages of African American and Latino populations. I want to ask you about this specific information in the report. First, of the 25 counties in North Carolina with the highest African American population, the report says that True to Vote and volunteers were sent to 24 of them. Is that accurate?
I don't know, Congressman, because all True the Vote does is provide training. The way our electoral process works, citizens will choose their party or candidate of their choice to go and work on behalf of, but True the Vote has no control over where citizens end up ultimately working.
All right, and the report went on to say that True to Vote had poll watchers in 9 of the 10 counties with the highest Latino populations. So you wouldn't have that information either then?
True the Vote provides training. We cannot place volunteers inside of the polls. Therefore, that report is fundamentally flawed.
All right. By contrast, according to the report, True to Vote had recruits in only 4 of the 25 counties with the lowest Latino population, and I assume that your answer would be the same for that. Is that right?
It would seem to me, Congressman, that a volunteer would be sent where there were volunteer needs.
All right. And who determines those needs?
The party or the candidate that the citizen chooses to work on behalf of, or in some cases the county when they need volunteers sufficient just to keep polling places open.
The report says you had only 2 volunteers covering all of the 10 counties with the fewest African American citizens.
We had no volunteers covering any county. We provide training, Congressman.
Now, if the numbers in the report are correct, they indicate that poll watchers were concentrated in counties where there were more minorities. It looks like the organization, if the report were accurate, was selectively targeting minority voters, and I think you would agree that you don't want that, do you? You wouldn't want that. I'm not saying, I know you're saying that didn't happen, but I'm saying that's definitely not what you would want.
No, the mission of True the Vote is to make sure that every American citizen, regardless of political party affiliation, has the opportunity to participate unimpeded in elections that are free and fair.
And on October 29th, your attorney wrote a letter saying this, and I quote, we operate completely in the open with anyone and everyone available to see what we do when we do it. Is that true?
Absolutely.
And so obviously, I hear what you're saying, but you can understand that when we get a report like that, we're almost incumbent. I would think Republicans and Democrats would be concerned about those kinds of allegations because those are the things that go to the fundamentals of this country, that right to vote. And you made it clear that you don't impede people from voting. Is that right?
No, sir.
Very well. Thank you very much.
I thank the gentleman. Ms. Engelbrecht, deep down, why do you think you had 15 visits from 4 federal agencies in a 2-year time frame after you applied? Deep down, why do you think you were targeted?
I think I was targeted because of my political beliefs.
Because of your conservative political beliefs. You know, I think it's actually, though, a little bigger. My guess is you were targeted because of your political beliefs, yes, but also because you were effective. It was working, right? True the Vote was having an impact. You were cleaning up voter rolls, right? You were educating people about how we should have free and fair, honest elections. You were praised by attorney generals all over the country, secretary of states. I'm looking at this, I'm looking at, you even had a program an outreach program to Hispanic Americans, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they targeted you because it was working. They said, well, we can't have this. Here's a conservative who's making an impact. That's why you were targeted. And all while this is going on, the President is saying things. After the Citizens United, the President's making all kinds of statements. He says things like, we got shadowy groups getting involved in elections. This is August 21st, 2010. attack ads run by shadowy groups. Foreign-controlled corporations can be involved. This is a problem for democracy, a threat to our democracy. Ms. Garrison, you haven't talked much. Let me ask you this. Is the Wetumpka Tea Party a shadowy group?
No.
Are you not? You're not secret, are you?
No.
Everyone knows who you are down home, right?
That's right.
You don't have any foreign corporations helping you out, do you?
No. We don't even have any corporate money helping us.
Are you trying to threaten any democracy?
No.
You're trying to promote democracy, right? Just like Ms. Engelbrecht's doing.
Right.
You want honest elections. You want people to respect the Constitution. Are you a threat at all to the democracy? Problem for the democracy? Of course not. And yet you were targeted, in Ms. Engelbrecht's case, 4 federal agencies in a couple-year time frame. None of them had ever had any interaction with her before. But suddenly, she's filed for tax-exempt status, and she's having an impact, and you're having an impact, and suddenly the president's making all these statements, and here comes the full weight of the federal government down on 2 ladies exercising their constitutional First Amendment political speech rights. And the minority says we shouldn't have this hearing and let you tell your story, and the minority tells us we shouldn't have Barbara Bosserman come in here, who's heading the investigation, and won't even give us the idea of who's heading it up if they haven't even talked to you. Which makes me I want to ask one other question here. Mr. Sekulow.
Yes, sir.
One of the many questions that your clients and Ms. Mitchell's clients got, I'm just going to read one, but there are all kinds of questions. I mean, we're talking about political groups involved in political activity, so they ask all these questions. One of the questions was, do you have a relationship with any candidate for public office?
Right.
Now think about this. They're asking Ms. Garrison,
Right.
Ms. Engelbrecht, and a boatload of other people across this country if they have a connection. But the person investigating this target has a connection with the most powerful individual in this country. Less than 1/10 of 1% of the American people give max-out contributions to a political candidate. That's who's heading the investigation. Now, if that's not irony, I don't know what is.
It's not only irony. In our view, and I said this again with no disrespect to Ms. Bosserman and her career at the Department of Justice.
I don't have any either.
It raised serious ethical concerns that she may well have brought up and the Department of Justice chose to ignore. But you look at the scope of the questions that were asked, which were way outside of legitimate inquiry. I mean, incredible.
I've looked at it.
And you look at cases like NAACP versus Alabama, NAACP versus Flowers, and others. There's a whole host of them. Because what was happening in those cases was exactly what was happening here. Government agencies were targeting groups to try to intimidate them into silence, in those particular cases, the NAACP, by saying things like, we'd like to see your membership list. Who do you talk to? What conversations with legislatures do you have? This has been going on since 1950. It didn't work out too good for the state of Alabama when they tried that to the NAACP. It shouldn't work out for the Department of Treasury, IRS either.
Great point. I just got one other question for you, and then we're going to have to recess and go vote. This is all going on. You're individual who's represented, as you pointed out, to the minority. You've represented the American Civil Liberties Union. You've represented Democrats. You've been in front of the Supreme Court. You've seen all kinds of things.
Yes,
your history. Cletus get the same kind of. I want to know, do you think this changed the impact of the 2012 presidential election?
I think there is evidence, American Enterprise Institute and others have put forward evidence that the groups being intimidated or even not recognized had a significant impact on that election. I think it's very well possible. We don't have we haven't had a trial on this yet.
I understand. I'm just asking your opinion.
Very well possible that the 2012 election was impacted by an aggressive, continuous, and systematic intimidation factor by the IRS, with applications still pending, Mr. Chairman, for 3 years.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask, you're going to recess before the votes? We had 15 minutes before.
You want to go, is what you're saying?
I think, yes.
I get you. All right. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes, and then we'll have to recess then and come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to be quick. First, I want to say to the Chairman, it's unfortunate that, one, our ranking member, Mr. Cummings, was attacked in this hearing, and that the Chairman provided an opportunity for 2 witnesses to be given a platform to do that. We've never done that when the Chairman of this committee has called for in his
But the
official...
gentleman, you
No, I will not. I have 5 minutes.
Well, I understand.
No, I will not yield, Mr. Chairman. I have 5 minutes.
Wait, I'm the chairman. Let me just say one thing.
It's my time, Mr. Chairman. I'm not yielding my time. I have 5 minutes.
The gentleman just asked me not to
Mr.
recess.
Chairman, I have questions for the witness. Can I go to my
I can
questions?
recess if you want, but I would rather you just yield me 30 seconds. I was going to make a point about the Mr. Cummings issue. The gentleman yield.
For the purpose of responding to why the ranking member was attacked.
I don't think the ranking member was attacked, but I instructed our staff a couple days ago to encourage Ms. Engelbrecht and Ms. Mitchell not to proceed with the ethics complaint. I further talked to them this morning not to proceed in that matter. We want the focus of this hearing to be the fact that these individuals were systematically harassed by their government. And that's what the focus is. You guys keep wanting to bring this issue up, and I've encouraged them not to pursue that.
Well, I don't know how you can...
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I don't know how in one breath you can encourage them not to do it, and in the next breath give them the very platform to do it. Let me go to my question.
Because for 3 years they've been targeted by 4 federal agencies. That's a story that needs to be told.
Mr. Chairman. I agree with the fact that groups, whether they're Tea Party groups, the NAACP, or Greenpeace, have been targeted by the IRS.
That's not the fact. That's not the fact.
There's no disputing the fact that there was wrongdoing, and there's no disputing that we should be working to fix that. But that's not what happened here today. What happened here today was an ongoing theatrics to continue the partisanship about relitigating an election that is over. Now, the question that I have, and the question that I want to represent is, I'm not here as a Democrat. I'm here as a representative of the constituents of Nevada's 4th that elected me to serve them, whether they are Democrats, Republicans, independents, or nonpartisans. I have Tea Party constituents in my district, and I respect their right as I respect any other constituent. And I am not here to push an agenda, but to get to the facts. And so I am deeply concerned about what has transpired, and I want to fix it. But that's never what this committee ever gets to, because we spend more time attacking our own members. But regardless of which party holds power, it's unacceptable, it needs to stop, and we need to fix it. One way I think we should be working to fix it is by addressing the inconsistency of the regulation for how 501c4s are treated to begin with. And according to statute, if they engage exclusively on social welfare activities, they may qualify for 501c4 status. However, it is not how it has been applied in that way that has allowed organizations to engage in some political activity as long as it is not the primary activity of that organization. So in my opinion, political activity should be strictly limited based on the statute. And we should completely prohibit any 501c4 from making expenditures, supporting or opposing a candidate for public office, or making monetary or in-kind contributions to political action committees or any other entity engaged in campaign activity. If we were able to get to that point, there wouldn't be this ambiguity to begin with. Now, we've heard issues where, unfortunately, some of the groups who were reviewed may not have been following this standard. Ms. Engelbert, your group, True the Vote, on your website it says one of your top goals last year was to, quote, trim the early voting period. Is that right?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
On your website, it indicates, are you guys against early voting? Do you oppose early voting in states?
No, absolutely not. However, there are states that have months of early voting, and I think that that could be looked at for a number of reasons, yes.
But on your website, it does not say trim the early voting period. I have a copy of your website. I mean, it's...
taken out of, in that context, it may say, in fact, but for the record, early voting is an important part of the process. I think there's value in determining whether or not a month before the election day, early voting is really necessary.
Well, during the 2012 election, we saw lines stretching so long that people couldn't even get to vote, and many people were discouraged. And from that, President Obama commissioned a bipartisan commission, the head of his election and the head of Mitt Romney's election, working in a bipartisan way to come up with recommendations. And their conclusion was actually that we need to expand early voting to help voters. Would you agree that that should be an approach that should be taken based on the recommendations of that commission?
I guess I'm a little confused about why we would want to try this at this point in this hearing, but in any case, I certainly respect the findings of the commission. Our election process is deserving of a hearing unto itself.
Thank you. I'll conclude by just asking if you would respond to the request by the ranking member on the statistics around where people were placed, particularly in the North Carolina voting. Will you provide that information to the committee as it was previously requested?
The gentleman's time has expired.
I had a question for Ms.
I know.
I'm glad to respond.
Okay. Can you quickly go ahead?
The response is I can't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
We do not place poll watchers. That was the fundamental misunderstanding that I tried to communicate to the ranking member when I asked to come and visit with him.
People are allowed to go where they want to go in America still. They can't say everything they want to say, or the IRS might come after them. They're still allowed to go where they want to go, right?
Can't always take the fifth, can
Yeah, well, they can do that too, yeah. We're going to have to recess. We want to thank our witnesses. There's restroom facilities that you can get to. We'll be back in approximately 30 minutes.